Everything revolves around you, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I didn't want to put it out there, but I mean, basically, I'm the center of the universe, and you guys have to suffer with no sleep. But if it helps, I'm equally just tired and grumpy. So, you know.
Tired and grumpy.
How did
Definitely.
you do that?
It's not my voice; it's someone else's voice.
What?
We're-
That
we're-
just
we
added
actually
so
haven't-
much flavor to the podcast.
All right. So, Character Art Podcast, Episode 9, with Jon Troy Nickel, Layna, me, Gavin, and our very special guest, Master of the Underworld, Lord of fantastic guitar effect voices.
I'll take that.
Yep. Paul Greveson. How's it going?
Hi there. Hey, it's going well. It's
Awesome.
nice to be here. Nice to talk to you guys.
Yeah. How are you guys doing? Troy, Layna?
Well, we
Other
woke
than-
up like 10 minutes ago, so we may be a bit slow and groggy, but we have coffee and banana cake.
Oh wow.
So-
Sweet.
Yeah, that's our podcast feel.
Well, I've already
Yeah.
had my dinner, so I'm on the way to bed. So I might be a bit slow as well, but for different reasons.
Oh, really? What time is it there?
It's about 20 past 11 p.m.
Jesus, we should have done this earlier.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, like I say, everyone's out at Eurovision tonight, so everyone's staying up late anyway, listening
So-
to crazy bad singing.
So is Eurovision, like, is it American Idol, basically?
No, it's been going longer than that stuff. I think it's like every nation in Europe is they put forth their best kind of pop act, and it always goes a bit over the top and a bit ridiculous, but it makes for fun viewing and like everyone trying to guess what crazy stuff each nation is going to do.
Huh.
And the UK always loses badly, so I don't invest too much in it.
Okay.
But I guess it doesn't get that much traction outside of Europe.
No, I mean, I think I've only really heard of it, but I've definitely not seen it. But I think like I've kind of developed a shell around my brain.
You're
that
not
just,
missing.
Like,
You're
yeah.
not missing that much.
yeah, like there has to be like keywords for me to pick up on, and if it's not like Megadeth or Doom related, I'm just not gonna pick up on it. Cool. So why don't you start off by giving us a bit of your history there, Paul?
Well, so some of you might know me from polycount as Mop back in the day. I've been on polycount since about 2001, so that's getting on for
Whoa.
15 years now.
You're like
Um,
member 3, right?
Of the second reincarnation of the site, yeah, there's been several reboots, and I kind of lose a bit of influence each time. But back when I started, I was an absolute noob. I was like 16 or something,
wow.
and I was just doing Quake 3 models in my bedroom and working with people on polycount to do stuff. And the very first thing I did, maybe you remember the Quake 4 Gladiator model that Per128, Per Abrahamson picked up and helped with.
Mhm.
And then we got like a couple of guys to animate it. I think that was the Mike and Bill Jukes, the Brothers Grimm. They animated that and put it in Quake 3, which was awesome to see because I can't animate very well. I'm a bit better now, but back then I didn't know what a bone was. In the technical art sense. That
Yeah,
is.
I'm sure you knew what an actual bone was.
No,
I mean,
no knowledge of
I
anatomy.
didn't even know
No
that.
idea.
I don't know how people work. I don't know any of that stuff. But back then, I was pretty useless. I like made a crappy low poly model, and then basically Per jumped into the thread and kind of just told me all the stuff I was doing wrong, basically. And he
Sounds about right.
yeah, which it's usually the way he goes, but he really taught me a lot there. Like my UV unwrapping was awful, and my triangle flow was awful, and everything was awful except for the fact that like the proportions were about right, and it looked kind of cool. But he made it into something really like something that people might actually want to texture.
Mhm.
And back in the day, there was always that stuff where people would just jump on a model if you released the zip of the like OBJ file or whatever, and then we got like 20 or 30 people just doing textures for it, and it was really awesome for me to kind of see all the crazy stuff that like really good texture artists were jumping on that and painting stuff, and I gave it a shot as well, but I wasn't very good back then either. But it was an amazing learning experience, and it really got me into polycount. And it actually kind of got me learning stuff that put me into university. And I went through a kind of computer arts course up in Scotland. And then, yeah, a few years after that, in 2006, I think, I did an art test for Splash Damage, who are a video games company down in London. And I joined as an environment artist after failing the environment art test twice. So I did it the first time at the same time as I was doing all my university finals and stuff, and I really kind of phoned it in, and it was a bit rubbish. But the art director at the time, Richard Jolly, who was actually also a graduate of Abertay University, shout out. I'm
sure he's listening.
Yeah, he might do. He gave me a lot of really good feedback on my art test, and actually gave me another chance. And so I put more effort into it the second time around, and I got hired. So since then, I've been at Splash Damage. So I've been there about 10 years now.
Oh wow!
Wow, man.
So I went from environment art through to technical art, and now I'm the lead technical artist. And actually, that means I feel kind of weird being on the character art podcast, since I've never actually been a character artist as such. But I still do a lot of character art in my free time, and I've worked on a lot of character systems at Splash Damage as well. So and I've had a chance to work with I think some of the best character artists in the industry, like John Fletcher is Jay Fletcher on Polycount. He's at Splash Damage at the moment. We've got a couple of other guys who don't post so much, and Space Monkey as well. He's art director there. A lot of kind of old school and big names from the internet who are doing art at Splash, which was really awesome. Got a chance to work with those guys.
Yeah, dude, I remember your talk at GDC like 4 years ago when we met with like you and Tim, and I think it's still probably one of the best like GDC talks that I've ever been to.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it was really fun to do, and I think we were the only people who opened with Eye of the Tiger. So
I
everyone
think
else kind of shuffled around waiting for the room to fill up, but we were like, no, we need to get some energy going. So we put Eye of the Tiger on in the background.
Yeah, definitely. It's
pretty good.
I think it's probably the first and last time that GDC will ever reference Rocky, you know?
You never know. Yeah, it was a really cool thing. Like GDC as well, like the stuff that's coming out, especially like this year, we've got like the Uncharted 4 talks and some cool technical art stuff going on in there, and a lot of character art stuff coming out. There's always really cool stuff to see at GDC, right? It's great to see all the videos and presentations coming out after that, and I think it's really good that the industry can share so much these days. It always used to be kind of really closed.
Yeah.
And now it's kind of opening up a bit more, being a bit more friendly, and I think that's great.
So when you started working at Splash, was that around? Was it Quake? Was it like Quake 3? Or was it
it was a bit 2006. So Quake 3 was what? That was ancient, right? That was 2001 or something. But we were actually working with id at the time, because we'd done some Splash Damage before I joined. Had done some Doom 3 multiplayer work, so they actually done some multiplayer maps for id for Doom 3, and so we had a really good relationship with id at the time before they were bought by Bethesda. And we worked with them and developed Quake Wars, which was an awesome project to work on because I love that kind of game. It was kind of class-based, very Wolf VT focused, kind of the staples of the studio, team-based, class-based multiplayer, and it was a really fun project to get involved with. And that was kind of where I started doing a bit more technical stuff, just because it needed to be done. And it was really cool to get involved with that level of project immediately. Felt pretty lucky.
Oh, that's awesome. So for like your tech, I mean, I guess like how you describe your job, like are you more on like the shader side stuff, or are you more like rigging, or I guess just general pipeline development?
At the moment, well, yeah, back in the day, I would say it was more like pipeline and general stuff. I mean, I can do rigging and I can do shaders, but they're not my forte. And now, like at Splash Damage, we've got a pretty decent size of technical art team. Like we've got 5 or 6 people in the building, and some of them are really, really talented at like different areas. So some of them are really strong at shaders, some of them are really strong at rigging, some of them are just great all-round generalists, and so that's what I really like about tech art, is the fact that you can split your focus different ways and kind of go, if something needs solving on the character art side, you jump into that. If a rig needs done or some scripts need to be done, you can do that. Or then there's like performance optimization or shader work to do. There's just always something interesting going on, and obviously different people can be more effective in different roles, but I just like the variety. These days, though, I'm mostly like being in meetings and writing emails and giving feedback on stuff rather than actually doing implementation of things, just because the company is so much bigger now than it was. Like I joined when it was like 25 people, I think, when we were working on one project, and now we've got about 180 and working on 3 or 4 different projects. So it's grown a lot over the last 10 years, and so obviously the role has changed. But yeah, there's always interesting stuff going on.
That's cool. How do you transition from, I guess being an environment artist into being a technical artist?
Well, in my case, I think it depends hugely. Like the interesting thing about tech art stuff, when I was in GDC back in 2011 or whenever it was, there was a kind of tech art round table, and there were about 20 or 30 people there from all different parts of the world and different companies and stuff. And they all had different stories about how they got into tech art. Like some of them had even come from production backgrounds. Some of them were riggers, some of them were artists, some of them were concept artists even. And it's like I think the general mindset of getting into tech art for me is like solving problems yourself. Like if you're faced with something that you don't know how it works, or you see yourself doing something again and again, and it feels like you really shouldn't be doing it that way, but you do it that way anyway, that's the kind of point where you'd start looking at like, well, maybe I can help myself out here, do a bit of a script, or maybe like find a way to automate something, find a way to do something in a cleverer way that means you do it faster or better. Because if you can save time, that means you can spend more time improving quality. Or in a production sense, if you do something faster, you save money at the very minimum. And then in terms of art, if you save time, you've got more time to spend on other stuff. So you can either do more or do better of the same thing. So it was like looking at ways of getting stuff done in a more efficient manner, really, and just trying to make sure stuff ran as well as it could. Like when you're working on games, it's kind of all about what runs, and there's a lot of effort goes into making stuff work really well. I'm sure you guys have worked as production artists on games before many a time, so you'll know about all the optimization stuff that goes on. But I think a lot of people don't really see that, and a lot of people don't necessarily understand how it works. And it takes a certain kind of mindset to really get into it, and some people just don't want anything to do with it, and that's fine. Like, I'd rather have an awesome character artist focused on making awesome character art than trying to figure out how the hell this thing should deform or whatever. The knowledge helps. I think having understanding of how those other areas work helps, but it shouldn't be your full-time job. If you're like a character artist or something, you should just focus on making awesome art. But again, I think that scales with the company. Like if you're at a small company, a few people working on indie games, you kind of need to do a lot, and you need to understand a lot of areas. But then if you're at a bigger company, it's more likely that you're going to be focused on one specific thing and like doing that really well. But yeah, so I think I've gone a long way around that question. But yeah, I kind of wanted to solve my own problems and like develop new stuff that would save time and make things look better. And I think I'm still doing that. Like tools is a really big interest to me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, dude. I one of the bigger companies that I've worked at, we had for Tryon, for example, the tech artists there, just absolutely vital. Hey, like we basically whenever there was new tools or things that could be developed to just shave hundreds of hours off the final kind of like man-hour count to get the job done. Man, it was all tech artists, man. They really kind of, I think, one of the central kind of pillars of any any game team, man, because that just everything that they can do, it can just have the biggest impact on your pipeline, man. Just huge.
Yeah. The way I think about it is kind of like, if you understand more about different areas, like if you understand how the code is working, how the systems are working in the game, then you can actually build that into how you think about how you're going to set up your character or your animations or whatever. And if you don't have that understanding, then it's going to be more difficult to make something kind of fit in with how everything else is working. So again, with like the general knowledge of kind of game development engines and tools and pipelines and stuff, it means you can kind of have that higher level holistic almost view. Maybe not to every extent, obviously, you can't know everything all the time, but like looking at least at systems, how they work, how the code works, how all the setup works, how the art is going in, and kind of being able to understand that and how it all fits together, you can sometimes find really big wins in there, or propose cool new methods of getting stuff done. And that's where stuff like the talk that Gav mentioned that we did at GDC, me and Tim, was on the Brink character customization system, which we developed from scratch for IdTech 4, I believe it was. So it was basically the Doom 3 engine with a bunch of local modifications. But that was the sort of thing where you kind of needed to look at the whole picture. Like, you've got meshes, and you've got textures, and you've got layers of stuff, and you've got animations, and it all needs to fit together, and it all needs to kind of work as one clean system. And if you don't understand all of the components of that, you're not really going to end up with a very, what's the word, kind of, I hate to use business buzzword, but like a synergistic, I'm going to make that one up, synergistic system. Hang on, I can do that.
A synergistic system.
And
That's so good.
so we
Just makes me right up.
And yeah, so like character customization systems to me are really interesting because you've got all those kind of inputs to it. You've got concepts about how the pieces are all going to work, and you've got the character artists trying to make stuff that looks amazing, and you've got the animators trying to make it all move correctly, and then on the tech side you've got programmers implementing systems about how it like fuses all the stuff together and how it bakes down the textures or whatever, and all of those things have to work in harmony for you to have a good working optimal system. And it's really interesting stuff to be involved with, like planning all that stuff. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of people, like all the best people of every discipline really inputting into it, and then kind of pulling it all together into a system that works for everyone. It's a fun challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I still think the Brink character system is probably, the ones I've seen is probably the most solid, especially for like a shooter, it seems like crazy robust, and like seeing from the talk that you guys did, fuck, dude, I don't know if other people are really thinking that way.
Well, I think one of the interesting things about it was the way our art director at the time, lead character artist who's now our art director, Tim, Space Monkey, he was like very keen on making whole characters. I think a lot of people approach character customization systems as like, oh, we're going to have like 10 pairs of pants and 10 sweaters and 50 hats and like 2 different heads or whatever, and that can lead to a very chaotic system. And I mean, it can be cool. You can end up with a lot of combinations that you weren't expecting, but you can also probably end up with a ton of combinations that just look like ass. And the way we approached it was to actually concept entire characters, but in a way that we knew how we were going to break them down. So if you wanted to build that character, you could, but if you wanted to use the parts of that character and mix with other characters, then you would as well, and it was all kind of concepted in such a way that it worked because the themes were the same. But it's a lot of work to do that, and we had some really cool concept art from Laurel Austin, who works at Blizzard now.
That's awesome.
Yeah, she did most of the concepts, if not all of them, for the characters there, and they were really fresh, really inspiring. The team loved them, and they really got into building that stuff. So again, it's like having the whole team buy into that system and know how it works, and like be involved in designing and building it. It really helps. Like, I think that's much better than just coming along and going, "Hey guys, model 20 different cargo pants." That's not really going to get anyone enthusiastic about it, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And we did a similar thing for Batman Arkham Origins a few years ago as well. It was it was on Unreal 3 actually, or Rocksteady's flavor of Unreal 3, and it was designed in a similar way, like characters concepted as single units, but then broken down. And we did a bit more layering stuff there, but that was another interesting challenge about how to get that working in a different engine and with higher quality like assets and textures and stuff. So it was a really fun project as well.
Was that on like the thug assets?
Yeah, exactly. So all the thugs that you could play as on the two teams fighting the heroes, Batman and Robin, you would choose your thugs, and then you could customize different types of armor and tattoos and sweaters and like scars and hair and stuff like that, and it all fitted together really nicely. And there was some fun stuff to work on there from the character systems point of view, because we had like all these different body types. We had like heavy set guys and skinny guys and like muscly guys, and obviously with all of those, if we had to make every piece of clothing fit every body type of guy, doing that individually would have taken years of art time. So that was where it was fun to kind of come up with some tools in 3ds Max which would just morph all the pieces to match the body types, so the character art guys only had to model one asset, and then it would just kind of fit on everything else, and then they just tweak up any little fixes manually that needed to be done. So it made it way more efficient to generate like way more content.
So I mean, I don't know how much you can get into, I guess the inner workings of that system, but how would you guys start? Would you start with like just the, in the average body type and kind of scale up and down from there?
Yeah, it kind of depends what you're trying to do. I mean, it depends what your extremes are. Some stuff just isn't going to scale. But yeah, generally starting with kind of the most average, kind of average to muscular hero type base tends to be a good point. Because then you can kind of go down for the skinnier, smaller people and up for the more heavy-set people. So yeah, we did that, and it worked pretty well. I mean, you're going to get stretching on textures and stuff if you go too far from the baseline, but having good polygon flow, like really good quad layout and density of polygons and stuff is really useful for that, because it stops texture stretching and just makes the morph transition a lot nicer. So, but it takes a lot of iteration. Like it took us a good like several months to get some good, like really good rules down for how to best model things so that they deform correctly. But I think that's the same with most games.
Yeah, like on a Sunset, we had like a pretty big character customization system, and I think that's kind of one of the shortcomings, like the way that we would make like basically like an average male, average female outfit, and then kind of scale it to fit all of them. But because anyone could wear anything, you basically had to be able to take something from like an average female up to like, a huge, like the Incredible Hulk, pretty much, right? So like you're gonna end up getting stretching. We ended up having tools that you could kind of bind things to I guess like controllers in a way. So if you have like buttons or whatever, that you could just scale that up,
But even then, that's almost a design problem. It's like, do you really actually want to do that? Do we want to make these tiny little jackets scale up to an Incredible Hulk size person or not?
Exactly.
Decisions like that can also affect the quality of the system as well. So there's a load of different things that you can do depending on what you want as an end result.
Yeah, I mean, I think like ultimately ends up becoming like a, like, is it more important to have everything looking amazing, or is it more important to have like thousands and thousands of options, And I mean, I think it's kind of the same as like if you look at, like maybe like Saints Row, right? Like where you just have like a crazy amount.
That's all about the freedom and the people's crazy choices, which is cool and it works for that game. But then like if you try to do something like that in Overwatch or whatever, that would just fall flat on its face, because it's about the character is the character, right? It's not anything else.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we had a similar system on Rift, because we had because there's so many armor sets and things like that in an MMO, and we had to have the small like leather armor set that had to fit a dwarf, and it had to scale all the way up to fit the I think the Barmy race in Rift, who are basically like the Incredible Hulk as well. So, but we basically created everything at the human size, which is kind of halfway between the two, and then kind of scaled it down a little bit and scaled the guts out, and and then of course just kind of scaled it up a bit and then bulked it out a little bit. It was sort of crude and elementary, but it was like just enough to kind of get it through, so that we only had to create one asset for everything.
Yeah, it seems to be like what everyone's doing, because it's the logical way. Like, no one wants to build tons of content by hand, but equally you've got to try and come up with a system that doesn't automatically butcher assets. Especially when you've got so many variations. Like, if you're generating hundreds and hundreds of things, either it's a QA nightmare or you're going to end up with stuff that's broken.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I guess that's a production challenge. And that's one of the differences between doing like personal art and production art, right? Like, you wouldn't normally ever even think about that if you're just working on a character at home.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, you're not sitting there like designing a character and you're like, how's this going to fit,
Yeah.
10 different body types or something?
Yeah, because you don't need to. But it would maybe be an interesting like challenge just to try and make something that you could reuse. And I know people do that with like base meshes and stuff and things in ZBrush or whatever, but like on a wider scale, I guess nobody bothers because it's a hell of a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think like in the end, like all you're really going to get is kind of like a screenshot of things that work together,
Yeah.
So
and for portfolios, it's the quality that matters, really.
Yeah.
Well, I guess if you're doing a technical art, like character technical art portfolio, it would be cool to demonstrate a system like that. Like, and say, hey, look what I can do. Boom.
Yeah.
Generate all this cool stuff.
Yeah, totally. I wonder, like, I mean, I've had people ask me before, like GDC or, like just reviewing portfolios or online or whatever, about having a technical portfolio. And, I mean, I don't really know how you do that. I mean,
it's really difficult, to be honest.
I mean, do you release tools to people, or do you just kind of have like a video showing how things work or something?
Yeah, either of those things. I mean, I think the best tech art portfolios that I've seen, including some people I've hired actually, tend to have both of those things. They have videos demonstrating the stuff that they've done, both in game and in applications, Max, Maya, whatever. And then they also, if they're generous, they have like script downloads or like code samples or whatever, so you can see how they did it as well as what the results are. But yeah, it's for example, right now, if you look at my portfolio site, it's ancient. Like, I think the newest work in there is from Batman, which is a good few years back, and that was just a few weapon textures that I managed to do.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, I don't really have any portfolio work except what I do at home. And that's mostly technical stuff at the moment, and it's pretty difficult to put online. Like, except if you've got something that looks good in a video, like if you wanted like localization tools or whatever, no one wants to see that. That's not a portfolio thing. No one's going, oh yeah, great. But
I'm sure there's one person out there that's going to be like, fuck yeah.
But it's so much. I think artists, like an artist portfolio, is such a nicer thing to have as someone who hires people. Like, if you see a cool portfolio come in, it's just immediately clear, like, the quality of art that's in there. But to try and do that for a technical artist is much more difficult, because usually their art is not as strong as like a top tier character artist or environment artist or whatever, because they have a different focus. But then it's much harder to evaluate their technical skills without actually seeing any of the work that they've done. And it's not something that you can look at in a picture in most cases. So it is a lot harder to kind of make those choices when you're hiring people, but also as an artist who's doing technical stuff, it's hard to figure out how to demonstrate that stuff even.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. You guys just worked on Gears, right?
Yeah, we did Gears Ultimate Edition with the Coalition last year. That came out really well. It was a lot of fun to work on, because back in the day, actually, this is even before, well, like I've mentioned, I joined polycount in 2001, so I guess I was in high school at that point. But you must know Kevin Johnston, Rorschach. Everyone knows Kevin Johnston because his art is just so cool, and it's kind of been so iconic for so long that
he is the fancy pillar guy, you know, like anyone who's ever made like a pillar with vines.
They've referenced his stuff exactly. He's been referenced all over the place. But before he got into that stuff, he was doing like Quake 3 texture sets and character concepts and stuff. Because he's clearly an all-round excellent artist, and I actually I got in touch with him when I was in high school because I really loved his Quake 3 texture sets to like diffuse only like 256 by 256 tiling textures that were really fun to look at and like based on cool sets like V for Vendetta style stuff. And I actually did a high school project on his texture artwork for my art class. which was really fun, but it kind of it came back around when we ended up working on Gears with the Coalition. I was like, holy shit, we actually have like his source files now. I can go in and look at his max files that he did for Gears back in 2007, and it was really cool to see all of that stuff. It holds up really well, actually. Like the stuff those guys at Epic were doing, nearly 10 years ago now. It holds up really, really well, the high poly work that they did, which is impressive, definitely. I've seen more recent stuff which isn't as good in shipped games, so they really set the standard, I think.
Yeah. Well, dude, they did such a good job at reusing assets and like kind of putting more time into individual pieces versus just like, insane amount of quantity, right?
Yeah, I think that's kind of where the kit bash mentality kind of started growing a lot. Of just like having a library of stuff and then like mashing things together and reusing things and using clever techniques like distributing things along splines, for example, to get a lot of detail quickly. There's a lot of cool techniques like that we used on Gears things, and it kind of leads towards the style that they developed, kind of very detail focused. Lots of bevels and like hard edges and metal wrapped around organic stuff. And I think it's kind of a function of the tools that they were using as well as the style that they were going for, which is really interesting to see.
Definitely.
Yeah, I remember actually seeing some of that stuff too, and I think a lot of that stuff that was released around kind of 2006, 2007, a lot of that stuff was still polymodeled and not ZBrush sculpted, right?
Yeah, they were only just getting into ZBrush then, I think. I know Kevin was using Max a lot for stuff.
Yeah, I remember seeing some of the character models that were just polymodel, and I was looking at them going, my god.
And the hard surface stuff holds up really well on the characters. I mean, we were looking at all those ZBrush files and like going, damn, this is cool. So it was a really cool project to work on, definitely. And it seems to have been received pretty well as well. Like, I think it did pretty well on Xbox and Windows 10 as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah, dude, I remember looking at, I think it was like Quake 4 years and years ago, and they released like the shots of their like marine guy, and like all of the fabric, the folds and stuff are all just hand modeled, and it still blows my mind. Like I don't know how the fuck I would do that now, like just I mean, I have some patience, but I don't think I have that much. Just sit there, just accurately model that stuff in.
Yeah. I do sometimes find it's easier to get kind of really clean lines by doing that. Like if you go into ZBrush a lot, unless you're well, I'm not very practiced with ZBrush, so I tend to end up a bit blobby, or like takes me a while to refine stuff. But doing it polymodeling, you get really nice clean shapes very quickly. We can do. But yeah, speaking of like Doom and Quake stuff, I remember Ken Scott's work, because I was always a big fan of his textures. I think Bobo said on one of the previous podcasts he was a big fan of Ken Scott's Quake 3 stuff, and yeah, that was super inspirational. But then he went on to do even more inspirational stuff with ZBrush on Doom 3. Like he was, again, that stuff that holds up super well now. Stuff that was done like nearly 10 years ago, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, he did like all the main like monster sculpts, right?
Yeah.
Or at least like the initial direction for them.
Yeah, and they've just got super good volumes and like forms, and the detail is nicely distributed. I think a lot of people these days tend to get carried away, going like, oh yeah, ZBrush, I can do 20 million polygons. I'm gonna put like tiny little dots everywhere and like all the fabric and all the stuff, and it's like, well, you got to remember the big picture is important as well, like the big shapes and the key designs and function of the thing, rather than just kind of going greebly on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, even like just the nature of putting something into a game, right? Like, so many times you'll see something that, you're looking at like a portfolio that has a bunch of sculpts in it, and there's no way at all this could possibly bake down into something usable,
or even
right?
if it did, it wouldn't look good. Yeah, it's like you put that in a game and it's just going to turn into a mess, because everyone always presents their ZBrush sculpts as like zoomed in, clean renders, and it's like that works fine if that's how you're presenting it. But as soon as you put that into a game, if you've got loads of detail on there and it's running around and it's got a texture and stuff, it's going to get noisy quick. So it's definitely something to keep in mind if you're building stuff for especially fast-paced action games.
What would you say like one of the main differences between working on like your own IP at Splash Damage is versus working with someone like the Coalition or like id or Raven?
Well, I think the key difference is like our own IP, we get to do what we want with it. We can kind of propose ideas internally and just bounce stuff around and say whatever crazy stuff comes up, and as long as everyone's on board with it, we can just go and do it. But obviously when we're working on things like Batman and Gears of War, there's a lot of established universe there. There's a lot of things that people expect and ways that things are done, and we have to go along with that, and like we understand the process and just generally try to be really professional about it. And like even if there's something that we wouldn't have strictly done if we were doing it as our own thing, we understand like why it's been done like that and why it has to stay that way. So it's just a matter of like making sure everyone who's working on the projects knows the difference between those two things, basically, because they are very different and the results are very different. Like your own IP tends to be a bit more risky, a bit more out there, and the established IP it's obviously got massive audience and people with expectations. So you've got to kind of cater to those different crowds.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from like an outside view, I mean, as far as I know, I've never worked at Splash Damage. Like one of the cool things about your company is that like all of the IPs that come in through your doors are fucking awesome. You know what I mean? So like even if it's not really yours, I mean, you still get to work on like Batman, like Gears of War, like Quake, and like all that stuff. So I mean, it's not like like one of my first jobs was working at like a porting house, right? And basically went from making this like cyberpunk shooter game to porting kids games onto the DS, and like, I mean.
Yeah, I guess we've been in a good position since we had a good relationship with id starting up, and that was kind of just a function of the people who started the company. It's what they were into, and they were really passionate about it. And there's still a good bunch of the guys who founded the company, what must have been 12, 13 years ago now, who are still kind of part of the senior management crew or even the development teams, and they really like those kind of like team-based action shooters, sci-fi stuff. So we've always tried to get deals that we know the team would like, and we've been fortunate to have good offers coming at us at the right time. But we pitch quite heavily as well. As an independent studio, I mean, having our own IP is great, and trying to build that is definitely a great goal. But having the big names like Batman and Gears and stuff like that is just, it's really good for the team to work on big things like that and help raise the studio profile as well. So I feel pretty lucky that we've had a chance to work on so many of those cool franchises with big publishers and big partners. Yeah, especially when. Sorry, go on.
No, go please.
I was going to say, especially when, unfortunately, like we've seen a lot of companies going down recently in the UK industry, especially like Lionhead recently were shuttered after Fable was cancelled, and then there are a couple of other studios over here who have kind of they've had to close down due to lack of funding or like whatever various reasons that are outside of their control. But it feels like we're doing quite well to be growing and still be strong and independent as a game studio. So yeah, I mean, I probably shouldn't be speaking too much for the studio, but I think they would agree with me.
No, I mean, it sounds accurate.
I was gonna ask about that actually. Did you guys end up assimilating a few of the people from Lionhead?
Yeah, so like all of the big studios, because I know Epic have a studio over in Guildford now, which is very close to where Lionhead was. But there's a bunch of good game studios still around in the area, and there were like when Lionhead closed, there were a bunch of recruiting events, and like we sent a bunch of people over to talk to them, see who was looking, because we've had quite a few roles open, and we still do. So yeah, we hired a bunch of people from Lionhead there and some other places. There's a lot of I would say healthy competition in the area. There's big studios like Rocksteady as well in London, not far from us, and they're great people, and we've worked with them before. But obviously they're their own business and they've got hiring to do as well. So
Yeah, I actually missed out on an opportunity to catch up with you in person about 4 years ago. I met with Tim and I think a couple of other guys.
No, I think we ran past you on our way somewhere else, and I was like, "Hi."
Oh
and
shit,
then,
dude,
like,
that's right. I all I remember from that was like clearly some alcoholic beverages were consumed that night. but yeah, no, it was awesome. And I was wanting to ask you, is Rafael Nuguez still working?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's cool, dude. Yeah, I need to catch up with Raf. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, he's a cool guy. He's another kind of classic all-round game developer. He does everything. He does like a bit of code, bit of animation, modeling, design.
Yeah.
He makes his own games from scratch as well in Flash, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's released a couple of iPhone games as well.
Yeah, he has. Legend.
Yeah, I am jealous. Like, he finishes stuff. I have a hell of a time finishing things. Like, I think someone posted on Twitter the other day, like, their projects folder is just full of cool named subfolders that have nothing in them.
Dude,
and it's like
that is my life right now.
Yeah.
I'm also a Pinterest user, so I'll start a board and I'm like, fuck yeah, I'm gonna do like a Simon Bisley character, right? And I'm just like collecting all this shit. It just never happens for me.
I actually try to stay away from that. There's so much cool stuff on Pinterest, and I could just scroll through it forever. And I'm like, you know what? I'll be better than this. I will physically right-click save this into a folder on my computer, so I will access it instead of going online, and that folder is just never opened again.
The only reason that I use Pinterest is so that when my computer eventually dies, I don't have to like worry about backing up all my reference. But at the same time, I'm kind of getting into the like CG Hub area of my reference library where like all my anatomy stuff and all that shit is online. So if they ever go down, I'm fucked. I have to go buy books or something.
I actually lost my reference library on my hard drive a few years back. I don't even know how or when it happened. I've been transferring stuff around so much. I've got like backups now, but I was just looking for some references one day and was like, where's it all gone? And I just hadn't looked at it for so long because I'd been using Pinterest and stuff that it had actually all just been lost in some hard drive move, and I've never got it back.
Oh man.
Oh well. Yeah, backup. Yeah. Everyone must back up. I actually started running my own little Subversion server at home, so I can put projects under version control, which is kind of a super nerdy thing to do, but it means I've actually got revision history of things, so I can like submit models and like make changes and not like lose the previous things and not end up with like 500 files called like character 01B, character 2, final, copy new, or whatever.
Dude, I feel like a caveman compared to you. I think I've just got a stack of hard drives that probably the majority is like, you know, character 01, character 02, character 03, and like the revisions between each of those are like, I changed a boot. You know what I mean? It's like it doesn't fucking matter. I just got gigs and gigs and gigs of just like useless backed up files.
Well, I guess it's not useless if it's backed up. You never know.
Well, I
'Cause,
suppose, yeah.
Until I started using revision control, I was just like, I had one file, and that was it. And it was like, any change that went into that file was there for good.
Oh god, I can't even imagine doing that. I'm horrible at that. I don't know how many times Troy's given me such a hard time working on one character. And the moment I like maybe sculpt like a piece of something on a tiny bit, I'm like, all right, that is now save file number 2, and then I'll just keep going till there's like 103 saves.
Yeah. No, I'm the same way. I think I have commitment issues in general. You know, like I have like the file saving thing. I have to save like, I don't know. I think I had 63 for my last project, and the same with like subtools. Like I'll just go fucking idiotically huge with subtools, and I have no idea why. Right? It's just like, well, that's a bolt, so I'm gonna save that off. You know what I mean? Like that's,
oh my god, I miss save. It's so bad.
Well, it would be cool if you've got that much history. What you could do is actually make a little. Well, this is the technical artist speaking. You could make a little script that actually loads up all of those files and like renders out an image from the same angle from each one, and then make a little GIF of it, so you can get an animated like work in progress thing.
Oh my god!
Yeah, dude.
That is amazing.
Yeah, dude, we could be a superhuman team together. You realize this, right?
You with your many files, and me with my 10 lines of Mac script.
Yeah, exactly. With your brains and my inability to commit to any changes, we might actually make something good here.
You never know. I've been meaning to do a script like that anyway. I might actually get around to it one day. Because you can do the same with version control, like just grab previous revisions of files and just like render them out. As long as the scale hasn't changed or anything, it would be pretty easy to just get like a sequence of things to see the iterations it went through. It would be pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, that would be awesome.
See, and
I might put it on my website when we get it done.
There you go. This is why a technical artist is the key to good development, right?
Well, it's kind of more just like fun little thing, right? It doesn't change the end result, but it could be a cool thing to do, show off.
Totally. So, I mean, you mentioned earlier, and obviously, I mean, we all know you from the long ago of polycount, but I mean, I get
old.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us have kind of not posted as much, or maybe not been as public on the forums. I mean, do you feel that there's been a change in the community that is like preventing you from doing that, or is it just kind of
I think it's just my own time. Like the time I was posting the most was kind of when I was at university or like just starting working full time. And I was on my own. I didn't have any attachments really. I just had more time to spend like browsing forums, giving critique on things, posting ideas or like feedback on scripts or whatever, and just trying to learn more that way. And I think partly it's like when you get deep into production at a studio, there's less on polycount that can help you in a way. Like apart from like if I was going to post a model, I know I'd get good feedback. But if I'm actually working on stuff for business reasons, I'm not going to find much on polycount that'll help me doing that. In fact, the problem I've had most of the time has been when I've been Googling for answers to things. I keep finding my own threads from about like 6 years ago where I've actually replied to my own question. And then in the intervening time, I've forgotten what that was.
Oh, fuck. This is like a nerdy technical artist time traveling memento plot line, It's
I think it's just because I'm really forgetful. But like I'll be looking for something and go, damn, I wish I knew how to do this, and then I'll Google it, and the top result will be a thread that I've posted in from polycount, and I'll just be like, oh yeah, I used to know how to do this.
Yeah. Well, it's like you're leaving like breadcrumbs for yourself through the internet, though. You know.
Yeah.
Like,
Polycount forums is now kind of half of my brain storage. I think.
Yeah.
I just don't need to remember things because I can Google them.
Yeah. Future Paul will appreciate this.
Yeah, exactly. I don't need to remember it. I can just write it down once and then immediately forget it. Great. Do any of you guys... I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
Do any of you guys...
geez.
turn the tables. Hang on, wait. Oh, I can...
The tables have turned.
Dude, that sounds even cooler because you've got like a really great accent, so it just sounds almost like a narrator. Like, it's great.
Yeah, I can do you some little snippets or something that you can play, like get a soundboard going. But I was going to ask, do any of you use Substance at all, like Substance Designer or Substance Painter?
I'm getting started with it, but I've mostly been sticking to Quixel for now. But I think it's only because of, I don't know. It's just like what I know, so I'm just kind of lazy in that way, I guess.
Yeah, because I've found that like Substance seems, to me, it seems like it's going to replace Photoshop eventually. It's just a matter of like the tools catching up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for character texturing anyway.
That's a big thing to say.
Yeah,
I
but
think.
I'm fairly confident with it.
Huh.
All right, so May 14th, 2016.
The predictions of the future.
4:13
I will
p.m.
Google this.
But yeah. Polycount. Paul Stradamus says Substance is going to kill.
Mobstradamus, please. But yeah, I mean, if you think about it, like Photoshop is not designed for doing game art, or like it's not designed for materials. Really, is the key thing, because like when you're doing, especially with physically based rendering and stuff these days, if you're making characters or environments, you're really, when you're texturing them, you're making materials really. And Photoshop has, well, aside from now with plugins like Quixel and stuff, Photoshop has no concept of a material. Mm-hmm. So anything that you do on top of that is kind of a hack around a base system that isn't designed to do what it's being told to do. Whereas if you look at something like Substance, that is designed for making materials. And I think because of that focus, it's going to be able to do stuff better eventually than Photoshop would be able to do. Mm-hmm. Just because that's like it's the sole purpose that tool exists, is to make materials on the 3D objects. Whereas Photoshop is really, well, the clue is in the name. It's for photo editing and doing like design stuff, and it's kind of this Swiss Army knife that can do everything, but it's not necessarily the best tool for every job. Yeah. And I think now that we're getting more specialized in like games and film as well, a lot of the pipelines are shared. And if you're trying to make materials, stuff like Substance, especially for game dev, if you're wanting to make a lot of variations of things or like reuse stuff in a material library, it just makes sense. Mm-hmm. And Quixel does the same sort of things, but I think the fact that it's based on Photoshop is going to be a hindrance eventually. Yeah, I think unless they make it into their own kind of standalone thing, which is totally doable, and then that will just be a competitor to Substance. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's my prediction.
Yeah, I think like Substance's ability to like actually plug into the game engine itself too is definitely an advantage, right? Because I mean, Quixel at the end of the day is just Photoshop.
Textures. Yeah, exactly. Because
so
if you're making like a free-to-play game or something, and you want to generate a load of brick textures, if you do them in Photoshop, you've got to save out, like, I don't know, a 2K by 2K, diffuse, normal, metalness, whatever, bunch of textures. But if you do it in Substance, you end up with just a tiny little generator file that's maybe like a couple of 100 kilobytes, and then you can generate as many different things as you've got parameters for that. And so suddenly downloading stuff gets super fast as long as you generate it all in Substance. And you can reuse stuff and change stuff and tweak things. So I just see there's a lot more power there that is kind of only being scratched at the moment. Like, people are just getting into it. And if you look at studios like Naughty Dog, they're already taking advantage of that. And I think they've got some GDC talks that they did this year on how they use Substance with that. But I think it's going to be really interesting over the next year or so to see how the landscape evolves in terms of material creation. Because for production, it just makes loads of sense to have a library of materials that are predefined.
Yeah, I mean, like once you get over like the learning curve of like learning the program itself, I mean, it's faster, it's like more accurate, it's generally more efficient to like run it in game, So
It does depend what you're trying to do, but for a lot of things, especially in games, and especially with like free to play being more of a thing, like games as a service, downloads happening all the time, the size of the build is a big issue. And that's another sort of thing that only a technical artist or like a build engineer would really think about. But I think it's a reality of game development, and it's not something that worries you when you're doing personal work, but I think it's something that is going to be more and more relevant in the future, unless someone invents super fast broadband.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No, please go for it.
I was going to say, like if you're trying to download, even Uncharted or like Doom or whatever, you probably had to wait quite a while because it's 40 or 50 gigs, right?
Yeah.
And I bet you at least half of that is textures, probably more like 2/3. So you could probably get those build sizes down a hell of a lot if there is a smarter way of generating or compressing the textures, and Substance does that. So I'm not being paid by them or anything.
I was actually going to say, and this was brought to you by.
I'm not affiliated with them in any way. I actually just really like that idea. And we're actually not. We've got a few licenses at work, but we're not actively using it on anything yet, just because of the pipelines that are in place. But it is something we've been investigating. So, it's a cool thing.
So yeah, buy Substance.
Gav says buy Substance.
If you play this whole thing backwards, it's just a giant plug for a bunch of different tools. I feel like I need to take a vacation just to learn new stuff. I don't know if you've ever like felt that way or not. But,
definitely, and especially now with like VR coming out, like all that stuff. There's so much movement in the world of technology. If you don't keep up with it, you're going to get left behind.
Yeah, definitely. And VR is like a beast, like all on its own. It's like a different way of thinking.
And now, stuff. It's really cool actually. I don't know if you guys have tried it, but we've got a Vive or Vive or however you pronounce it demo kit at work, and it's really fun. A lot of people have been trying it out and saying how cool it is.
Yeah, we
things like tilt brush and stuff. You paint in 3D in VR.
Yeah, maybe like a few like VR titles at work, but I've been terrified of putting the headset on. So.
It's a really cool experience. I've actually got a DK2 Oculus Rift at home. I got it like a year or two ago, whenever it came out, and it's really good for driving simulators.
Dude, I thought you were gonna just add driving. Just strap the fucking thing onto your head.
Yeah, my insurance premiums have gone through the roof. No, it's really cool for because it doesn't have the positional tracking in the same way that the Vive does, because it's only got one kind of positional tracker, like a little webcam. It's kind of best for just sitting down, but that works really well for driving games. And now there's a load of games that have really cool detail in them. Like people have spent hours and months modeling like physically accurate interiors of cars and things, and it's actually really cool to be able to just put on a headset and pretend you're sitting in a Ferrari or whatever.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's worth a shot if you ever get a chance to give the Valve demos that they did for the Vive are awesome. Like the guys who worked on that put a ton of detail into them, and they're super fun. And they're just really, really enjoyable, and they showcase all the best things about it. So if you ever get a chance, have a try. Like I think it's called The Lab or something. Their Valve demo is really good. And Tilt Brush is awesome as well, because you're just kind of standing around painting in 3D all around you and stuff. I really want ZBrush VR because I think it would be so cool to actually sculpt characters like full scale in virtual reality. You just get loads of you get such a great sense of depth. It would just be really interesting.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I actually... have you guys heard about that that I think it's called Dreams or Draw Your Dreams or something like that.
Is that the Media Molecule game?
Yeah, the Media Molecule
Yeah,
game.
it's for PS4, I think.
Oh man, I was watching some footage of that the other day, and I was like, "Fuck, this is great, dude."
Yeah,
It was
it's
like
really cool.
he was kind of sculpting and painting and throwing it on kind of like pre-made rigs, and
Yeah.
it was running around in the game, and then he was using like parts of the model that he had just sculpted to create the environment that he was running around in, and it was just like this whole kind of experience of like creating everything inside this kind of pre-made like bunch of tools, and everything was just working, man. It was fucking amazing. It was blowing my mind where I guess like the whole kind of creative suite idea is going, you know what I mean? Because it's just everything was there. It's just like, here it is, man. Just jump in and start making stuff. Whatever you want to make.
Imagine if you had that like networked and you had multiple people in there and everyone was kind of building stuff. It'd be so cool, right?
Yeah. It just really blew my mind when I was watching that.
Yeah, the Media Molecule guys are a really smart bunch. They've been doing some really clever things, and I think they did an engine from scratch for all that stuff because it's like really specific to how they do their 3D. Well, yeah, it's kind of a mix between sculpting and I don't know what, but it's very, very clever.
Yeah. The interface actually looks really complicated to me. I was looking at it going, wow. Because I think he was using like two Move controllers, like PlayStation Move controllers or something like that.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, so it was like, it looked pretty tricky the way he was kind of like doing everything with the UI. But man, somehow it's all working, and he just...
It's quite intuitive, like the hand-based controllers in VR. They I think it's an easier thing to pick up than like keyboard and mouse, because you know how your hands work, you know where they are, and all you have to do is kind of press a button now and then. So I think it's an easier thing to get into, but yeah, like Gav said, it's like you got to get past just putting the headset on.
Yeah. No, I'm convinced I'm gonna put it on just immediately, like get a migraine and start throwing up or something. This is like the worst possible situation.
Well, some people are affected more than others. It's true, like getting simulation sickness or whatever. But I think the Vive does pretty well at reducing that. But you do get a really weird feeling when you take the headset off after you've been in there for a while. It's like you're going out of a virtual reality into a different.
Yeah. Do you ever like do you just like walk around like breaking into Ferraris and trying to drive them because you think you're still in a game?
Virtual reality. VR.
No.
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 Awesome.
So something else I was thinking about, because I was thinking about things that I could talk to you guys about, and because Troy, you work at Weta, right?
Yeah.
And Layna does as well, right?
Yeah, I was working there for a short while.
Okay, because I guess you're doing film stuff, like in your day job.
Oh, well, Troy works in the collectibles team, but sometimes they'll just poke their head and be like, "Hey, could you just do this?" And we're like, "Okay, yep."
Because I was wondering, like, in film and stuff, is real-time tech kind of being used more?
I think there's like talks of it. You know what I mean? There definitely is more and more like real-time applications kind of like creeping in to whatever's going on. It's just like, hey, this would be easier if we could pre-visualize this right here. Let's use this and have this going on this monitor so that we can just throw that in. And they're all things like Marmoset and Substance and all of those kinds of things. And you know, Marvelous Designer and all of that kind of stuff is all kind of just sitting just off to the side to help everything go faster.
Right. Yeah, because it seems like with Unreal Engine 4 and stuff and physically based rendering, you're getting more and more like it's getting closer to film. Like if you look at a Pixar movie from 10 years ago or 5-10 years ago, you could probably get pretty close to that now in real time in an engine like UE4 or even Unity potentially with the right settings. And
you need to come to Weta and say that. Because I worked in a completely different department than Troy. I worked in the 3D department, and that's where we actually like I don't know, take things like once it's been finished in design, it gets past the 3D to actually build to prepare to build like a suit of armor or something.
Right.
And of course, me coming from a very small game background and knowing Troy, my brain's always like, oh well, because the next thing after you print it, it goes to painting and or casting and molding, yada yada. But the vision still hasn't been all there, and I'm thinking, well, if we just use real time, we used even marmoset, we used all these things, you got everything at your disposal. But I think Weta has been very traditional for a very long time. So even the talk of like keyshot and then being able to use VR to view it in 360 is still extremely new. So all these programs, it's kind of like you bring it up, and it's kind of like, oh, I don't really know what that is, so it's hard to like throw in the pipeline.
Yeah, because I saw Epic kind of trying to push Unreal Engine more for like short films and like animations and stuff, and it seems to hold up really well for that, because you can pre-render stuff, but being able to tweak stuff in real time and just like fly around it and make big changes without having to spend days re-rendering is awesome.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine that stuff is like a lot more prevalent at Weta Digital. Yeah, because all the post, because Weta Workshop is all kind of like pre, and Weta Digital is all the post effects. So
right.
Yeah, so I imagine that they would be well into all of that, man.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing to see just where that's going as well. Like, in, let's say, give it 5 years, are we going to be seeing real-time stuff that's as good as the visual effects you're seeing in movies in the cinema these days? I think it's not that far away, because very clever people are working on things like this.
Oh man, yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of guys in the design room, that are lots of film buffs, man. They really know their stuff, and they've been looking at a lot of game trailers recently, video game trailers, and just looking at the stuff that's coming out of Unreal 4 and stuff like that, and they're just like, man, this is really, really impressive stuff. It's like, and it's just like you say, it's more or less you can direct the scene, you can shoot the scene however you want, you can move around, do whatever you need to do, all in real time. You don't need to re-render anything, and that I know that idea is sitting in the backs of their heads. And I know that they're just kind of looking at that going, wow, man, there's just a shitload of potential there.
Because with all of that stuff, like with more realistic rendering, like faster frame rates and now VR and stuff as well, I reckon it's, give it 5 years and there's going to be some mind-blowing stuff that people will be doing, like film quality things at 90 FPS and VR and whatever. I'm sure it'll happen. 5
years. That's 2 predictions from Paul today.
Yeah, and I don't know how you're going to hold me to that one, but maybe we can get some kind of bet going on. I don't know.
Definitely.
But I think it's a really cool time. To be honest, it's a cool time to be alive with the way technology is going. Like, you've got guys like Elon Musk doing SpaceX things, like landing rockets on moving platforms at sea and saying we're going to be going to Mars before 2020 and all kinds of crazy stuff. There's just, technology is going mad at the moment. It seems it's just pushing so many boundaries everywhere. It's really interesting, but there's no way to keep up with it all. I think you kind of just got to pick your battles.
Yeah, definitely. So, I don't want to keep you up too late, Paul. I know it's almost like 1 a.m. In your part of the world.
It's past midnight.
Yeah. So, I don't know. Maybe wrap it up so you can get your beauty sleep. Not that you
need it. Oh yeah. Oh, I do.
Cool.
Yeah, cool. It's been great talking to you guys.
Oh man, it's been awesome.
I hope I didn't bore anyone too much. I do have a tendency to waffle when given a mic.
No.
No.
Not me anyway.
I thought I was actually super immersed in everything you were saying, because I'm totally not technical at all. That just blows my mind. I have a problem, and I just kind of sit and shake the monitor and yell at it until it works. I don't actually do that, but listening to that and all the possibilities.
take a scientific approach, and like the vast majority of problems I see, like from doing like troubleshooting for artists for the last 10 years, one of the first things you should always do is just check that the thing that you're trying to do is the thing that you think you're trying to do. Like, I've seen so many people have problems because the file that they were saving wasn't the file that they were trying to import into the engine and stuff like that. It's just really simple things like that, like it's got an extra 1 on the end or something. It's like sometimes you just need to go right back to the basics, and like some people tend to overcomplicate their own problems. But yeah, that's I've kind of got that scientific approach for stuff.
Sounds like Troy. I guess, Troy, you must be a technical director, man. Or not director, technical artist. I can't tell you how many times I've done that, and he's just like, dude, it's really, did you not see what you're doing? You saved it wrong, and it's in the wrong place. It's right there. Oh,
yeah,
man.
it's the thing is that's a really easy mistake to make, and if you think you're doing the right thing, then you think everything's fine, so you start looking for a more complicated problem, and then you can end up in that situation where you're like grabbing your monitor and jumping up and down on your keyboard or whatever because something's not working, but it's not the thing that you thought it was.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my game development tip for the evening. Check your file names.
Yeah. Check your shit.
Check your file names.
Yeah, you can use that one for free.
Man.
Cool. Okay, well, thanks for having me.
Dude.
Hopefully people find this interesting.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm sure they will.
Yes, I think they will.
Have a good afternoon, stroke evening, stroke whatever it is, wherever you are in that time of the world.
All right, man. Take it easy.
Oh, good sleep, man.
All right, bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.